you so much, Thiago, for sitting here with me today.
Thank you, Paul. It's an honor to be here.
Privilege is mine. Thank you. So I'm hoping, of course, we can talk about the flotilla, in addition to Gaza, what's happening there, and your own optimism in the face of moral evil. So to start the discussion in earnest, I'm hoping we can begin with this question that I think there's a lot of people thinking about as well when they see you doing what you do. What life was like for you growing up in Brazil, and if that informed the kind of activist you are today.
Actually, Paul, I'm 38 years old and I was born in Brazil, so in the peripheries of the system in the global south, where the International Division of Labor sees our country as a big mining field, a big oil field, a big farm, a big mill, and actually a big casino for financial speculation. So in the underdeveloped countries with many remarks about this, we see a lot of exploitation, a lot of oppression, a lot of destruction of nature to serve the center of the system. It's very frustrating to see that Brazil was always this promise of being a huge power in the world, but always had been between the 10th biggest economies, but also between the 10th most unequal places in the world. So we will live with a lot of riches, a lot of fortune, but also at the same time with a lot of poverty. And in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, where I live, the third biggest city in Brazil, we see that in every single corner, happening all the time, the same thing. So I grew up understanding that the system that we live is simply wrong and simply unjust. And I would hear that people do not thrive because they don't work hard enough. And I would see that it was a lie, that the people that I knew that worked the most were the ones that had the least. Yes. So I always knew that there was something wrong, but I could not really connect all the dots, and I could not really feel that I could do something about it. So I was dealing with organized social movements, was dealing with international solidarity movements for Palestine and for other countries as well, that I started to understand, because when you live in a colonized society, you receive colonial education as well. So I was taught to admire and to know all the neighborhoods in New York, all the rivers in Europe, and would know pretty much nothing about my own continent, about Latin America, or about Africa, about Asia. And it was very frustrating to understand that I was part of something, that it was not by choice, but it was imposed on me, and that I knew that, just like Brazil suffered through the extermination, genocide of the indigenous communities, and the slave market, the market of enslaved people, trafficked people brought from Africa to Brazil, and so many inequalities, I knew that those inequalities that existed everywhere in the world. But I would listen that they were the fault of these people because they were violent people, they were not civilized people and stuff like that. So I always had the thought that there was something more to the world that I was being told. Yes. And it was with the Palestinian struggle that I really understood and started to connect the dots. That in the fact we are all together, part of the same system and part of the same structure that creates these three big evils: exploitation, oppression, and destruction of nature. So in a way, I decided to mobilize myself both in Brazil but outside to do as best as I could to be useful for this purpose. I always say that when I was 18 years old, I'm 38 now, so 20 years ago, I discovered my purpose in life, to be supportive of this change in the world, for this mobilization that has its aim of building a better society than this, because the society that we live in are destroying the planet, are creating wars, creating so much violence, and we need to create something better than that. We are capable of that.
Just to go back to speak for a moment about the solidarity movements you've been involved in, do you see your involvement in the Freedom Flotilla Coalition as an extension of that, or it's somehow uniquely different?
I feel it's pretty much the same thing, Paul, because, for example, I organize solidarity missions to go to Cuba. Cuba has been suffering a blockade from the United States for 6 decades as well. And I organize solidarity movements for the indigenous communities in Brazil, for the campesino communities in Brazil, and also in Lebanon and other countries. So solidarity with Palestine came to me as something very natural 20 years ago, when I understood that the Palestinian people were living through colonization and ethnic cleansing and 8 decades of genocide. I knew that if we are really human and we really think that you and I and every human being needs to have the same rights, we cannot abandon the Palestinians, like think that they are a different category of human beings or something. So it came very naturally, the support to the Palestinian cause, and the Freedom Flotilla was an extension of that, because since 2010, I hear about this beautiful non-violent mission that was trying to break an illegal siege over Gaza and trying to bring humanitarian aid. And they were brutally attacked, and 10 people got murdered 15 years ago in 2010. So it was something that shocked me, because I always thought that the way they said that they were killing Palestinians because the Palestinians attacked them first, so they had the right to defend themselves. So they were the ones attacked, they were the ones oppressed by a violent religion or a violent Arab ethnicity or something like that. That's the discourse for so long. But when we see a obviously non-violent mission, a humanitarian mission, try to break an illegal siege by international law, it is illegal at all terms, the siege over Gaza for 18 years, and they are attacked and killed, that showed me that it was more to that. And I needed to understand more. I was already trying to support with that. I actually applied for that mission by mail. Internet was very different by then.
Right.
I was only 23 years old, Paul. Yes. So they said, you can come, but you have to pay for your own ticket. And I said, oh, so then I cannot come. Right. It's not possible for the economy of Brazil, for my life. Yes. So I didn't went to the flotilla, but I always had the flotilla in my imagination as one of the most beautiful nonviolent actions that I could imagine. And so eventually came, many years later, I went to Palestine, I went to the occupied territories in the West Bank, the territories occupied in 48. I didn't manage to get to Gaza, was not allowed. And then the flotilla came back to me again as something that was still going on, and I said, I want to be supportive of that, I want to help. And then I came and I became an organizer of the flotilla, and then I became a member of the steering committee member of the flotilla, and then I became coordinator of some missions. Yes. And so it all came naturally as trying to be useful to solidarity with Palestine. The thing is that we never do this for ourselves. Missions like the flotilla, they didn't even need it to exist. If countries would do their work, if the international organizations would do their work, missions like that should not exist. But since so many institutions and international community abandon the Palestinian people, the people has to do it. Yes. So that's why we do it.
Yes, I certainly feel the last flotilla, the Madleen exposed that, and of course, you know, because it was yourself that experienced it. The Madleen was intercepted by Israeli forces, and effectively the volunteers were kidnapped. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that, what your experience of that was like, and whether you anticipated something like that happening.
The context of the Madleen mission, Paul, is amazing, because since the escalation of the genocide happened, I never say that the genocide started in October 2023, because it's 8 decades of genocide and ethnic cleansing that structured itself into an apartheid colonial state, and which is led not by a religion, not at all, but by an ideology, Zionism, which is supremacist and racist and needs to be defeated in any way. It's the duty of our generation to do so. So I always say that when the escalation of the genocide happened, the Freedom Flotilla had the goal to make sure that we guarantee a mission to bring aid, because they blocked, the 18-year blockade became even worse. Yes. So people were starving to death and still are starving to death in Gaza. So we tried to do an emergency mission that through bureaucratic warfare, pressuring the Guinea-Bissau government, we were defeated when we tried to depart from Istanbul. They took, the Israeli government pressed Guinea-Bissau and they took away our flags. And then we managed to try to sail with the Handala, this boat right here. And the engine broke in August 2024. And then we tried to sail with the Conscience, and Israel bombed the boat between Malta and Italy with 2 Israeli drones. And the only boat we had was the Madleen, the smallest boat of all of them, which only would fit 12 people with a very limited amount of aid that it could carry. But we said, we put all the aid we can carry and we just go, because we need to do something. And we thought, if we do the right mission, if we manage to communicate this correctly to people, we will touch their hearts, because they see the images and they know that starving children to death is wrong, that bombing hospitals, school shelters, residential areas is simply wrong. But they see no way to challenge it. They see no way, that nothing that brings them hope that it will change somehow. So we knew that the Madleen had this mission to bring hope, and especially to try to break the siege and create this humanitarian corridor, so that then the big boats could come if the countries knew that they had a way to get in, that they didn't have to obey the occupying force, which is against international law. They could bring the big boats full of humanitarian aid. So you just needed to be the vanguard to open the gate, open the way. And that's why we decided to go. But like you said, we're dealing with a rogue state that does not respect international law. So Israel has been committing the most horrific war crimes for 2 years in a row without being stopped by the international community. So for them to to kill people or to kidnap people. It's nothing. So they kidnapped us, they took us against our will, changed our course, which was to Gaza, to Ashdod port in Israel. And then in Ashdod port, they tried to pressure us to sign a confession that we tried to enter Israel illegally. We got caught, and that's why we were being deported, and we were banned from entering Israel for 100 years. That's why they had what they had on a paper. And they said, if you want to get home, you sign this document. And we said, we'll never sign this document because we'll never admit to a crime you didn't commit. You are the ones committing a crime against international law, because the law of the seas, we are in international waters, more than 100 nautical miles from Gaza or from Israel. Yes. And we were protected by the International Court of Justice. In their provisional rulings, they said, Paul, that Israel or any other country are prohibited to hinder any type of humanitarian aid to get to Gaza, because they know how horrific are the conditions in Gaza. So we had this situation that we were doing things according to international law, they were doing against, but they were pushing us to sign a document admitting to a crime we didn't commit. So we all refused, and then they took us from the port to an immigration facility. At the immigration facility, they said, so we decided that we're going to deport you. But if you want to be deported now, you need to acknowledge that you're being deported. If not, you're going to jail. And we decided that first of all, no one wanted to sign anything, because we didn't want to corroborate with anything they said, unless they said, we are kidnapping you, we're stealing your boat and your humanitarian aid. We didn't want it to sign. But we decided that 4 people of the 12 of the Madleen will go first to tell the stories, because they were lying all along. They kept us for 20 hours in our boat with their commandos, with their rifles, but they were filming, giving us water, giving us bread, like doing a PR stunt on us. And pretending that they were treating us well while they were kidnapping us. And so it said, they're going to lie so much about this, it's important that some voices go first to tell the story. And then we decided, and Greta wanted to, for example, Greta Thunberg, one of our participants, she said, I want to stay with you, because I want my presence to be protected for everyone. But we said, but we also want your voice outside to make sure the whole world hears the kidnapping and what happened to our mission, to the aid, because the people in Gaza will be waiting for that aid. Desperately waiting for that. So 4 people went and signed the acknowledgement of deportation, but they didn't confess to a crime they didn't commit. And the other 8 were taken to Givon prison in Israel. And at Givon prison, they separated the 2 female to the 6 male that were there. And we didn't have access to a phone call to our families. We were totally blocked from the outside world. The lawyers had a very hard time reaching out to us. We were put in a court hearings where the judge would say, why did you try to enter Israel illegally? And we will say, no, that's not what happened at all. You've been committing genocide and ethnic cleansing for 8 decades. You structured yourself into an apartheid colonial state, and you're led by a racist and supremacist ideology called Zionism. You put Gaza into 8-year illegal blockade, and you've been committing the most horrific genocide for 21 months. If you want me to answer to you why we are doing a mission, it's because of that. But we did not try to enter Israel illegally. We were kidnapped. And they were very angry when they heard that, because they're not used to hear that in Israeli courts, because they're so coercive when people get arrested. Palestinians, they're not even judged by civilian courts, they're judged by military courts there. So this judge was so frustrated when I told her all of that. And then she said, why are you not eating, why are you not drinking water? And I said, look, I am on a hunger and thirst strike because you're refusing the same food and water to 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. And you're only offering this to me because we have visibility, because you want to say that you're nice to us, but you're assassinating, starving children to death in Gaza. So why would I accept that? And then they said, but if you don't eat, if you don't drink, we're going to put you in solitary confinement. And I said, look, I'm a non-violent humanitarian worker that has been a peaceful mission to Gaza. You kidnapped us, and now you're going to decide, not me, where a person of this type of conduct should be in a colonial state like yours. It will not me to say where you're going to send me. You are the one committing a crime by retaining us here even. And then she actually did. 2 days later, she sent me to solitary confinement. And after that, we've been to almost a full day, 20 hours in prison, kidnapped on our boat. Then 4 days in prison, 2 of them I was in solitary confinement until we all got deported back to our homes.
In that time that they were keeping you in custody in prison, were they trying to break you down, so to speak, to make this false confession? Like every day, were they still putting pressure on you to keep doing that?
Yes, they were, Paul. The thing is that whatever an international solidarity worker goes through in the colonial state of Israel is nothing compared to what they do to Palestinians. So whenever people were asking, were you mistreated? I said, look, there are 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli dungeons. 400 of them are children, and are still kept there in the worst conditions. There's the Degrading torture camp, for example, that the reports are the most horrific things. And there is Gaza itself, which is an extermination camp right now. So what we've been through is pretty much nothing, but we were through a lot of pressure there. They were depriving people from sleep. They were the jail was infested with bed bugs, and the solitary confinement had rats, had cockroaches. You cannot differentiate day from night, so there was no external lighting or anything like that. A very violent place as well. So there was a lot of pressure all the time. For example, they would take this medallion that I got when we were about to sail to Gaza. This little girl, 12-year-old girl, she said, take my necklace and take it to Gaza. And I never took it away until the day I went to prison. They took it away, and they said, they were writing down what they were taking from us. And they said, a necklace of Israel map. And I said, no, it's a map of Palestine. And then they said, no, Palestine does not exist. This is a map, write down. And said to the other, write it down. It's a map of Israel written Palestine. Yes. And I said, oh my God, this is not at all what international law says. Yes. And then they said, look, Palestine is only in your head. It does not exist for us. For us, all this region is Israel. And they even said, we believe in greater Israel, which goes from the Nile to the Euphrates River. And if you consider that, it would take Egypt, it would take Palestine, it would take Syria, Lebanon, Jordania, some parts of Iraq, some parts of Saudi Arabia. So it's a huge colonial project. So it was crazy to see how much do they think, the colonialistic mind think the way they think.
Yeah, like it's like you got a window into their worldview, if you can call
it
that.
Yes.
I'm wondering, Thiago, if you can tell us about the Handala and what its objectives are, and are they the same? Are they different? What does it set out to do?
You know, Paul, this boat, the Handala, is the boat number 37 of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition. The blockade exists for 18 years. For 17 years, we've been trying to break the siege. And only the first 5 missions actually got to Gaza. All the missions after that, they were intercepted. They were defeated at port by bureaucratic warfare. They were attacked. So no mission after that managed to get to Gaza. 36 boats were intercepted before. So this is something that we really keep on doing, because we know that nonviolent action works like this in an anti-colonial context. When you look at the independence of India and the struggle of the South Africans against the apartheid system, or the struggles of black communities in the United States against the Jim Crow segregation laws, racist laws, we know that this type of nonviolent action demands persistence. Because every mission you go, you bring more awareness to people, you bring more conscience to the world. You show how oppressive they are, how violent they are. And every day when people get aware of what's going on, and we manage to find a way to invite them to be part of something bigger, that they can actually participate, we get stronger. So we really believe that we will break the Israeli siege, and we will create this humanitarian corridor. We just don't know when, but it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. So we really want the Handala to be the one to break the siege, but if not, I'm pretty sure we need to send a very clear message to the Zionist entity. They block one boat, we'll come back stronger. They block another boat, we'll come back with a lot more boats. So they cannot stop this long march to freedom through violence. And that's what the British Empire learned in the independence of India. That's what the apartheid structure had to learn in South Africa. That's why the racists had to learn in the United States. That this type of nonviolent direct action, they're very effective, because people can see how nonviolent this is, how beautiful this is. It's in the heart of, in a planet of 8 billion people, in the heart of most people, there is this most obvious thing, Paul. Yes. If there's people starving, you bring them food. If there's people suffering, you try to ease this suffering. Yes. And that's what we're here to do. We're not here to replace the Palestinian, their long resistance to freedom, but we're here to be in solidarity with them. And to show that it's not fair what the world has been doing with them, either complicity, either in silence. Yes. So we really need to do something.
I felt the need to also ask you this question, Thiago, just because this group represents the polar opposite of what you're doing, as a group that you yourself as someone who is so intent and so sincere about bringing food aid to the Palestinian people, there is the group called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that says it's giving aid, but we know since it began operations that over 600 people have been killed in the attempt to access food that presumably they're making available. So I'm wondering, how has their presence informed or even emboldened your activism?
The thing is, once we understand the colonialist mind and the genocidal experiment that Israel has been trying to pull in Palestine, we see that they see Palestinians as a demographic threat, and they want to exterminate the Palestinians or remove them, ethnic cleanse that region and take over the region, or to make them subject to this horrific dictatorship, because they say it's the only democracy in the Middle East. But what we see is that Palestinians, they do not have the same right, and they have 4 different legal systems. If you're from Gaza, if you're from the West Bank, if you're from East Jerusalem, or if you're in the territories occupied in 48. Yes. And there will even be a 50 if you're in the diaspora or denied your right of return. So this dictatorship, they really have no limits, and if they could, they would starve all the Palestinians to death. And actually what they tried to do for 20 months, they destroyed all the aid system, they destroyed the water sewage system, they destroyed all the capacity of the Palestinian people to remain alive in that region. And then when pressure was too big, Netanyahu himself admitted that he had to give some food in order to stop losing a lot of important strategic alliances. Yes. So the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is nothing but a cover-up for their genocide, pretending to be giving aid, but also serving the purpose of the ethnic cleansing and genocide. So the places where they put it's to move, to displace the Palestinians, to go to those regions. The way they act, killing Palestinians there, turning into death traps, is also part of the ethnic cleansing. But it's also, first of all, it's to ease the discourse that were saying that they were starving Palestinians to death. So now they say we are not starving Palestinians to death. We have the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. But the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is killing Palestinians itself and also starving all the others to death, the ones that are not being displaced by this process. So it's all part of the same evil, cruel, genocidal experiment. And we need to refuse that. We need to say that that was never about aid. That is not real aid being brought that. We need to make sure, like the United Nations says, like the Security Council resolutions, the very few that were approved in the 2 years, or the ICJ or ICC resolutions, said that humanitarian aid needs to get there unhindered and independent from the occupying force. The occupation that Israel does in Palestine is illegal, and we cannot abide to that. We cannot depend on them to maintain the very people that they are exterminating, maintain them alive and bring them food. They will never do that.
Thiago, I know that you have a family, you have a very loving family, and also a young daughter. And I feel that just you being such a committed activist and a father, you're in a position certainly to answer this question. As a parent, I'm wondering if you could, because I feel a lot of parents are asking about this, if you could provide any insight into how do we speak honestly but responsively, sensitive, to honor the sensitivities of children, to children about the genocide.
It's very tough, to be honest, Paul. My daughter was born already during the escalation of the genocide. She turned yesterday 1 year and 6 months. When she turned 1 year and 5 months, I was in solitary confinement, so I could not reach out to her. It was devastating for me. And I was always thinking, and I even wrote to her a letter in prison, trying to communicate that to her while I was away from her. And what I was saying is that children just like her, as beautiful, as intelligent, as pure as her, were being bombed and were being burned alive or were being starved to death. So that's why I was away from her. That's why I could not hug her that day. And what I've been saying to my baby is that in the world we have some injustices, and we have to do our best to fix those things. We need to heal the world whatever we can. And I always try to make sure that we have the preemptive, but we also have the response to what is already wrong. In a preemptive place, we need to teach our children not to discriminate, to treat people as equal, to not to judge people based on their religion, race, or any other criteria. We need to teach our children to be the future in the society we want to live in. So we do our best with my baby Teresa. We do this, me and my wife. But we also say very broadly to her, very openly to her, that I'm sure she doesn't understand this yet, but she will eventually, that there are injustices, and that these injustices, they're not someone else's responsibility, but it's our responsibility, and it's her father's responsibility and her mother's responsibility. My wife Lara is also an activist, so we do this together. And we really think that whenever people ask me, were you afraid to go on that boat? I would always think that I was not afraid at all. We were preparing as best as we could. We were fulfilling an important duty, an important mission to the Palestinian solidarity movement, so I was honored to be on that mission. I was concerned about the scenarios and preparing myself as best as I could. What I'm really concerned, Paul, is the future that my baby and the other billions of children will live in. That's what I'm really concerned. And we need to do any sacrifice is worth for them to live in a better place.
Yes, certainly. And actually, just as an aside, I feel that that story or your experience is so important, because eventually I like to speak to activists such as yourself as to how they're raising their own children in this time, because I feel that one day they will ask, if they were not told, why didn't we know, why did we grow up not knowing when we could have done something as well. Thiago, I have to say that you exude, I'm probably not the first person to say this, but I feel you exude a very, and that's why I mentioned earlier the optimism in the face of this moral evil. I feel you exude this lovingness, this care, your presence, and I'm wondering if you can speak to that, the kind of emotional strength that you have been able to maintain, and perhaps others can develop within themselves in the face of this moral evil.
Paul, throughout the years, when I was 18 years old, I was shocked to see the world as it was. I recognize myself a lot in people for the last 2 years, that they are also shocked, and they ask themselves, what's with international law? What is human rights? What's going on in the world? And I had the same questions 20 years ago. And I was so shocked and so sad to see the world as it really was. And then I was so angry, but it was a dignified anger, because I was angry because I felt people were suffering without need. Why were they being through all of this? Why was society so unequal? Why so much exploitation, so much oppression, so much destruction of nature? And then for the very first years that when I was an activist, I was very angry. And that was very present in my way of communicating, very frustrated with everything. And I'm still very frustrated with the things are. But the thing that changed is that throughout the years, I understood that people can mobilize by anger and by fear. And those are very powerful ways to mobilize people. But the way people mobilize for life is when they have hope, when they have love, when they create communities where they feel that they belong. So I decided throughout the years that I would not only bring the sense of urgency of all that is happening wrong in the world, but I would also try to bring them a bridge with imagination, with creativity, to visualize that society can be different. And I would try to be an example of that as much as I could, with all my faults, all the things that I do wrong, but I try my best. I try my best to say that we can treat people differently. We can be more generous. We can be even trying to find happiness. Brazilians and Palestinians, they are very much alike in that they find happiness in pretty much every situation. And we try to bring that as well for people that they can understand that despite all the suffering, walking and answering to the greatest calling of our generation can bring also some sense of realization, and can bring some things that are very, very good for us, and can bring love and solidarity in a way that you don't imagine. But once you experience it, you know that it's very nice to be part of something like this. And you want this movement to be bigger and bigger and bigger, and to get a global perspective. That's why I try to do this, to try to show them to go to this struggle. It's important, it makes change in the world, and it also can be a very happy way of living your life. I cannot imagine living a different life than this.
Thank you so much for this very illuminating conversation, inspiring conversation too. I'm just wondering, before we wrap things up, if you have any final thoughts or observations at all.
You know, Paul, what I keep on thinking is that, like you said, every generation is going to ask us, what were we doing at this moment, at the sum of all crises. So we have environmental crisis, we have social crisis, we have wars, we have so many things going on at the same time. And they will all ask, what did you do when the genocide of the Palestinian people was happening? And it's very important that every person can say that I was doing my best. So the Freedom Flotilla Coalition and the missions that we go by boat, they are not more important than any other action anywhere else. They're actually connected, and they don't work without the others. They're interdependent. Yes. The sea missions, they need the mobilization. They need people in the breaking the blockades on the big techs, for example, and make sure the free information passes by, or bringing truth through media like you do, or also going on demonstrations, or also promoting boycotts, or also the very brave people, courageous people that disrupt the armed factions, that blocks the boats that are fueling the genocide. Also the people that are in their communities but raising awareness, and not only talking about the genocide, but also teaching the communities not to reproduce exploitation, oppression, destruction of nature. So wherever you are, the time is now to create change and to see a better world. That's what we need to do. That's what we're here for. I'm pretty sure that every generation has a calling, and this calling that we received is very complex, very challenging, but it's necessary that we do, that we mobilize to stop the genocide, we mobilize to defeat Zionism, to defeat imperialism, to create a better society for every human being and every being on this planet. It's our task to do so, and so I'm very honored to be walking this path as best as I can, with all my faults, with all my challenges as well, but I think that's what I want to do with the rest of this short time that I have here.
So thank you so much, Thiago, and also for just being a light to the world right now.
Thank you so much, my brother.
Very difficult, very dark times, so thank you for being that light to the world right now.
Thank you so much. We are together.
Yes, brother, yes. Thank you. Yes, beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you.
It
was an honor, my brother.
Yeah, no, my pleasure, brother. My pleasure.